Section 3 of Handbook of Nature Study. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jill Engel. Handbook of Nature Study by Anna Botsford Comstock. Part 1. The Teaching of Nature Study. The Nature Study Attitude Toward Life and Death. 2. Pets as Nature Study Subjects. The Nature Study Attitude Toward Life and Death. Perhaps no greater danger besets the pathway of the nature study teacher than the question involved in her pupil's attitude toward life and death. To inculcate in the child a reverence for life, and yet to keep him from becoming mawkish and morbid, is truly a problem. It is almost inevitable that the child should become sympathetic with the life of the animal or plant studied, since a true understanding of the life of any creature creates an interest which stimulates a desire to protect this particular creature and make its life less hard. Many times, within my own experience, have I known boys who began by robbing birds' nests for egg collections, to end by becoming most zealous protectors of the birds. The humane qualities within these boys budded and blossomed in the growing knowledge of the lives of the birds. At Cornell University, it is a well-known fact that those students who turn aside so as not to crush the ant, caterpillar, or cricket on the pavement are almost invariably those that are studying entomology. And in America, it is the botanists themselves who are leading the crusade for flower protection. Thus, the nature study teacher, if she does her work well, is a sure aid in inculcating a respect for the rights of all living beings to their own lives, and she needs only to lend her influence gently in this direction to change carelessness to thoughtfulness and cruelty to kindness. But with this impetus toward a reverence for life, the teacher soon finds herself in a dilemma from which there is no logical way out, so long as she lives in a world where lamb chop, beef steak, and roast chicken are articles of ordinary diet. A world, in fact, where every meal is based upon the death of some creature. For if she places much emphasis upon the sacredness of life, the children soon begin to question whether it be right to slay the lamb or the chicken for their own food. It would seem that there is nothing for the consistent nature study teacher to do but become a vegetarian, and even then there might arise refinements in this question of taking life. She might have to consider the cruelty to asparagus in cutting it off in plump infancy, or the ethics of devouring in the turnip the food laid up by the mother plant to perfect her seed. In fact, a most rigorous diet would be forced upon the teacher, who should refuse to sustain her own existence at the cost of life. And if she should attempt to teach the righteousness of such a diet, she would undoubtedly forfeit her position. And yet what is she to do? She will soon find herself in the position of a certain lady who placed sheets of sticky fly paper around her kitchen to rid her house of flies, and then in mental anguish picked off the buzzing, struggling victims and sought to clean their too adhesive wings and legs. In fact, drawing the line between what to kill and what to let live requires the use of common sense rather than logic. First of all, the nature study teacher, while exemplifying and encouraging the humane attitude toward the lower creatures and repressing cruelty which wantonly causes suffering, should never magnify the terrors of death. Death is as natural as life, and the inevitable end of physical life on our globe. Therefore, every story and every sentiment expressed which makes the child feel that death is terrible is wholly wrong. The one right way to teach about death is not to emphasize it one way or another, but to deal with it as a circumstance common to all. It should be no more emphasized than the fact that creatures eat or fall asleep. Another thing for the nature study teacher to do is to direct the interest of the child so that it shall center upon the hungry creature rather than upon the one which is made into the meal. It is well to emphasize the fact that one of the conditions imposed upon every living being in the woods and fields is that it is entitled to a meal when it is hungry, if it is clever enough to get it. The child naturally takes this view of it. I remember well as a child, I never thought particularly about the mouse which my cat was eating. In fact, the process of transmuting mouse into cat seemed altogether proper. But when the cat played with the mouse, that was quite another thing and was never permitted. Although no one appreciates more deeply than I the debt to which we owe Thompson Seton and writers of his kind, who have placed before the public the animal story from the animal point of view and thus set us all to thinking, yet it is certainly wrong to impress this view too strongly upon the young and sensitive child. In fact, this process should not begin until the judgment and the understanding is well developed. For we all know that although seeing the other fellow's standpoint is a source of strength and breadth of mind, yet living the other fellow's life is, at best, an enfeebling process and a futile waste of energy. Should the nature study teacher teach how to destroy life? It is probably within the proper scope of the nature study teacher to place emphasis upon the domain of man, who, being the most powerful of all animals, asserts his will as to which ones shall live in his midst. From a standpoint of abstract justice, the stray cat has just as much right to kill and eat the robin which builds in the vines of my porch as the robin has to pull and eat the earthworms from my lawn. But the place is mine, and I choose to kill the cat and preserve the robin. When emphasizing the domain of man, we may have to deal with the killing of creatures which are injurious to his interests. Nature study may be tributary to this, in a measure and indirectly, but it is surely not nature study. For example, the child studies the cabbage butterfly in all its stages, the exquisitely sculptured yellow egg, the velvety green caterpillar, the chrysalis with its protecting colors, the white-winged butterfly, and becomes interested in the life of the insect. Not under any consideration, when the attention of the child is focused on the insect, should we consider a remedy for it when a pest. Let the life story of the butterfly stand as a fascinating page of nature's book. But later, when the child enters on his career as a gardener, when he sets out his row of cabbage plants, and waters and cultivates them, and does his best to bring them to maturity, along comes the butterfly, now an arch enemy, and begins to rear her progeny on the product of his toil. Now the child's interest is focused on the cabbage, and the question is not one of killing insects so much as saving plants. In fact, there is nothing in spraying the plants with Paris green which suggests cruelty to innocent caterpillars, nor is the process likely to harden the child's sensibilities. To gain knowledge of the life story of insects or other creatures is nature study. To destroy them as pests is a part of agriculture or horticulture. The one may be of fundamental assistance to the other, but the two are quite separate and should never be confused. The field notebook. A field notebook may be made a joy to the pupil and a help to the teacher. Any kind of blank book will do for this, except that it should not be too large to be carried in the pocket, and it should always have the pencil attached. To make the notebook a success, the following rules should be observed. A. The book should be considered the personal property of the child, and should never be criticized by the teacher, except as a matter of encouragement, for the spirit in which the notes are made is more important than the information they cover. B. The making of drawings should be encouraged for illustrating what is observed. A graphic drawing is far better than a long description of a natural object. C. The notebook should not be regarded as a part of the work in English. The spelling, language, and writing of the notes should all be exempt from criticism. D. As occasion offers, outlines for observing certain plants or animals may be placed in the notebook previous to the field excursion, so as to give definite points for the work. E. No child should be compelled to have a notebook. The field notebook is a veritable gold mine for the nature study teacher to work in securing voluntary and happy observations from the pupils concerning their out-of-door interests. It is a friendly gate which admits the teacher to a knowledge of what the child sees and cares for. Through it, she may discover where the child's attention impinges upon the realm of nature, and thus may know where to find the starting point for cultivating larger intelligence and a wider interest. I have examined many field notebooks kept by pupils in the intermediate grades, and have been surprised at their plenitude of accurate observation and graphic illustration. These books ranged from blank account books, furnished by the family grocer, up to a quarto, the pages of which were adorned with many marginal illustrations, made in passionate admiration of Thompson Seton's books, and filled with carefully transcribed text that showed the direct influence of Thoreau. These books, of whatever quality, are precious beyond price to their owners. And why not? For they represent what cannot be bought or sold, personal experience in the happy world of out-of-doors. The field excursion. Many teachers look upon the field excursion as a precarious voyage, steered between the Scylla of hilarious seeing too much and the Charybdis of seeing nothing at all, because of the zest which comes from freedom in the fields and wood. This danger can be obviated if the teacher plans the work definitely before starting, and demands certain results. It is a mistake to think that a half-day is necessary for a field lesson, since a very efficient field trip may be made during the 10 or 15 minutes at recess, if it is well planned. Certain questions and lines of investigation should be given the pupils before starting, and given in such a manner as to make them thoroughly interested in discovering the facts. A certain teacher in New York State has studied all the common plants and trees in the vicinity of her school with these recess excursions, and the pupils have been enthusiastic about the work. The half-hour excursion should be preceded by a talk concerning the purposes of the outing, and the pupils must know that certain observations are to be made, or they will not be permitted to go again. This should not be emphasized as a punishment, but they should be made to understand that a field excursion is only, naturally enough, for those who wish to see and understand outdoor life. For all field work, the teacher should make use of the field notebook, which should be a part of the pupil's equipment. Pets as nature study subjects. Little attention has been given to making the child understand what would be the lives of his pets if they were in their native environment, or to relating their habits and lives as wild animals. Almost any pet, if properly observed, affords an admirable opportunity for understanding the reasons why its structure and peculiar habits may have made it successful among other creatures and in other lands. Moreover, the actions in the daily life of the pet make interesting subject matter for a notebook. The lessons on the dog, rabbit, and horse as given in this volume may suggest methods for such study, and, with apologies that it is not better and more interesting, I have placed with the story of the squirrel a few pages from one of my own notebooks regarding my experiences with Furry. I include this record as a suggestion for the children that they should keep notebooks of their pets. It will lead them to closer observation and to a better and more natural expression of their experiences. End of section 3. Recording by Jill Engel.